Grosvenors Britain's Richest Noble Family documentary? Consider, for a moment, the concept of true wealth. Not the kind you see on Sunday Times lists, the tech billionaires with their glass towers and space rockets, not the footballers with diamond-encrusted watches. No. I'm talking about the old kind, the deep kind. The kind that doesn't shout, but whispers. In the heart of London's West End, there are no signs bearing the family name. Walk down Bond Street, past the jewelers and the art dealers, stroll through Belgrave Square, where the garden gates are locked with a key that only a handful of people possess. Stand in Grosvenor Square with its gilded statue of Franklin D. Roosevelt. You are standing on a kingdom you cannot see. This is the story of the Grosvenors, Britain's richest noble family. A dynasty so private, so deliberately quiet, that most people walk across their land every single day without ever knowing their name, but they know yours. The original acquisition. To understand the Grosvenors, we have to forget everything we think we know about how wealth is made. We are not talking about trade or industry or clever stock market bets. We are talking about a far older currency, marriage, timing, and a single staggering piece of luck. The story begins not with a duke, but with a baronet. Sir Thomas Grosvenor in the year 1677. He was a respectable man from an old Cheshire family. Their seat was Eaton Hall, a sprawling country pile near Chester. They were gentry, solid, unspectacular. But Sir Thomas did something that would echo for 350 years. He married an heiress. Her name was Mary Davies, and Mary, a 12-year-old girl at the time of the betrothal, brought with her a dowry that seemed odd, even worthless to the casual observer. She brought a swamp. It was called the Manor of Ebury. A few hundred acres of waterlogged fields, ditches, and market gardens, lying just west of the City of London, between the old village of Knightsbridge and the Thames. In the 1670s, it was nothing. It was where London sent its rubbish. But Sir Thomas, or more likely his advisors, saw what was coming. London was burning. Literally, the Great Fire of 1666 was still fresh in memory. And it was growing west, away from the pestilence of the old walls, towards the clean air of the countryside. The Grosvenors simply sat on that swamp. They didn't build, they didn't sell. They waited. For 70 years, they waited. The London grid. By the early 1700s, the Grosvenors were wealthy but not exceptional. Then came the genius of the family, Sir Richard Grosvenor, and later his descendants, who made a decision that defines London to this day. They decided not to sell the land. They decided to lease it. This is the invisible architecture of British aristocracy. You do not sell the goose that lays the golden egg. You rent the feathers. The Grosvenors drew up a grid, a master plan. Streets named after themselves: Grosvenor Street, North Audley Street, Davies Street after the girl with the swamp, and squares: Belgravia, Mayfair. They didn't build the houses themselves. That would have been vulgar and risky. Instead, they leased plots of land to builders for 99-year terms, sometimes shorter. The builder put up the townhouse. A wealthy merchant or a minor lord moved in, and every single year, for the entire lease, the ground rent flowed back to the Grosvenors. At the end of the lease, the building, now a priceless Georgian masterpiece, reverts to the family, and they lease it again, forever. Think about the mathematics of that. For 3 centuries, the Grosvenor estate has collected rent on the most expensive real estate on the planet, not just houses. The land under Claridge's Hotel, the land under the American Embassy on Grosvenor Square, the land under the Ritz, the land under half of Mayfair's gentlemen's clubs, its private banks, its hedge funds. They don't own individual buildings, they own the dirt. And in London, the dirt is worth more than the gold on top of it. The dukedom and the pause. In 1874, Queen Victoria elevated the family. The head of the house became the Duke of Westminster. It was a recognition of their unique position. They were no longer mere landlords. They were custodians of a piece of the national fabric. But the 19th century brought a challenge. The Industrial Revolution was creating new money. Railway kings, steel magnates, newspaper barons. They built vulgar palaces on Park Lane. They bought yachts. The Grosvenors watched, and they did something remarkable. Nothing. While other great families, the Devonshires, the Bedfords, sold off paintings, closed up country houses, and watched their fortunes dwindle through death duties and mismanagement, the Grosvenors held tight. The second Duke, Victor Grosvenor, was famously reclusive. He didn't enjoy London society. He preferred the shooting parties at Eaton Hall, but he understood the balance sheet. He refused to sell a single freehold. When death duties came in at 40%, then 60%, then 80%, other aristocrats panicked. They sold the contents of their libraries, the paintings from their galleries. The Grosvenors simply went to the bank. They borrowed against the estate. They paid the tax in cash, because the cash flow from Mayfair and Belgravia was so vast, so reliable. It was like owning a machine that printed banknotes. By the time the 20th century reached its halfway point, the Grosvenors were quietly, calmly, the richest family in Britain. Nobody said it aloud. That would have been bad form. The Eaton Hall way, but there is another half to this story. The half that exists away from London. Eaton Hall in Cheshire. The Grosvenors are not just London landlords. They are an old Cheshire family, and they have never forgotten it. The current Duke, the 7th Duke of Westminster, Hugh Grosvenor, grew up there. It is a strange, almost surreal place. The house is a Victorian Gothic fantasy. Spires, gargoyles, towering chimneys. It looks like a film set for a Gothic horror. But inside it is a home, a massive, overwhelming, drafty home. There is a private railway station on the estate, just for the family. There is a chapel that dates back centuries. The stables are bigger than most village high streets. But here is the contradiction. The family that owns half of London's West End lives for much of the year. In the countryside, they hunt, they shoot, they fish, they attend the local church. The current Duke's sister, Lady Tamara, married Edward Van Cutsem, a man from another old landed family. The wedding was at Chester Cathedral. The reception was at Eaton Hall. It is a world of tweed and wellies, of church fetes and village pubs. And yet, from that quiet rural base, an urban empire is managed. The contrast is jarring. The Grosvenors are both the ultimate city financiers and the ultimate country squires. They have somehow managed to be both modern and medieval at the exact same time. Well, the eccentric billionaire, the third Duke. To understand the family's character, you have to meet the third Duke of Westminster, known as Bendor. He was one of the great characters of the early 20th century. He was not a businessman, he was a patron. Bendor's great love was art. But not just any art. He fell in love with the paintings of George Stubbs, the horse painter, and with Fabergé eggs, and with French furniture. He spent his money not on expanding the estate, but on filling it with beauty. He owned the most incredible collection of Stubbs in the world. The famous painting Whistle Jacket, that rearing horse, was his. He also owned the largest collection of Fabergé outside the Kremlin. The story goes that he would sit at his desk in Eaton Hall, surrounded by jewel-encrusted eggs and gold cigarette cases, while estate managers stood nervously by trying to talk about drainage ditches and lease renewals. He wasn't interested. But Bender did one thing that changed the family's moral compass. During the First World War, he converted part of Eaton Hall into a hospital for wounded soldiers. He paid for it entirely himself. He visited the men. He wrote letters home for those who couldn't write. He was a strange, shy, art-obsessed man, but he understood duty. When he died in 1953, the death duties were astronomical. But again, the estate survived. Because the land beneath Mayfair does not care who sits on the throne or which party is in power. It just sits there, renting. The sixth Duke and the horse. The most famous Grosvenor of modern times was not the current Duke, but his father, the sixth Duke, also called Gerald, but known to the world as just plain old Gerald Grosvenor. He was a soldier, he was a farmer, he was a landowner, and he was, by the time of his death, a very rich man. But the British public knew him for one reason: the horse. He owned a racehorse called Sea Pigeon. It was a magnificent, temperamental, brilliant animal, and the sight of the Duke of Westminster standing in the winner's enclosure at Cheltenham or Aintree, wearing a flat cap and a worn tweed jacket, not a silk tie in sight, delighted the nation. He looked like a farmer who had got lucky, not a billionaire. That was the trick. The sixth Duke was a master of the ordinary. He drove a battered Land Rover. He swore like a trooper. He once gave an interview where he said, "I'm just a farmer with a bit of land." The interviewer didn't laugh. Because in a sense it was true. He was a farmer. The fact that his bit of land included Oxford Street, Bond Street, and half of Victoria was simply not discussed. Behind the scenes, Gerald Grosvenor was a hard businessman. He modernized the estate. He diversified into Liverpool, into Vancouver, into Shanghai. He understood that London was a global city, not just a British one. He hired professional managers, brought in MBAs, turned the Grosvenor estate into a modern property company with a coat of arms. But he never let go of the central principle: never sell the freehold. By the time he died suddenly in 2016, aged just 64, his wealth was estimated at £9 billion. The family had survived world wars, depressions, socialist governments, and financial crashes. They were bulletproof, the young Duke Hugh Grosvenor, and then the earth moved. When the sixth Duke died, the title and the bulk of the estate passed to his only son, a young man named Hugh. He was just 25 years old. Suddenly, Hugh Grosvenor became the seventh Duke of Westminster. He inherited a fortune, then estimated at around £9 billion. He became the richest person under 30 in the world, overnight. But here is the extraordinary thing. Hugh didn't want it. Not in the sense of greed. He had grown up at Eaton Hall, yes. He had gone to the best schools, Ellesmere College, then Newcastle University, then Oxford. But he had also gone to work. He worked for a green energy company. He lived in a modest flat in East London, not a penthouse in Mayfair. He drove an old Volkswagen. His friends called him Hughie. The press went mad. The most eligible bachelor in Britain, the Golden Bachelor, the billion-dollar boy. Hugh hated it. He retreated. He gave exactly one interview to the Cheshire Life magazine, a local publication, and talked about his love for country sports and his family. He refused to appear on rich lists. When Forbes estimated his wealth, his lawyers sent polite but firm letters asking to be removed. He is, by all accounts, a genuinely nice man. Quiet, thoughtful. He has his father's love of shooting and farming. He has his mother's good looks and discretion. But he also has a problem that no other 25-year-old has ever faced. What do you do with the dynasty? The inheritance tax maze. We have to talk about the money because the money is what keeps the story alive. Britain has one of the most aggressive inheritance tax regimes in the world. 40% on estates over £325,000. For most families, that means selling the family home. For the Grosvenors, it is a chess game. The sixth Duke spent years preparing for his own death. He structured the estate into trusts, into companies, into agricultural land which is tax exempt. He passed the majority of the non-dukedom assets to his 4 daughters before he died. By the time Hugh inherited the title and the central London estate, the tax bill had been minimized. Exactly how much was saved? The family will never say. But experts suggest that without that planning, the tax bill could have been £3 billion or more. Instead, the Treasury received a fraction of that. It is perfectly legal. It is perfectly aristocratic. And it explains why the Grosvenors still exist as a family, not just a museum. Hugh did not have to sell a single street. The sisters. The sixth Duke had 4 daughters before Hugh was born. Lady Tamara, Lady Edwina, Lady Viola, and Lady Sophia. In many aristocratic families, the daughters would be forgotten, their wealth parceled off into dowries and marriage settlements. Not here. Each daughter, at the time of their father's death, inherited a separate fortune, estimated at around £500 million to £1 billion each. They control their own trusts. They sit on the boards of their own companies. They are among the richest women in Britain, and you have almost certainly never heard of them. Tamara married Edward Van Cutsum, a landowner. Edwina married a television historian, Dan Snow, a surprising match, but the family welcomed him. Viola married a financier. Sophia is the most private of all, living quietly with her family. The sisters are not rivals to Hugh. They are partners. The Grosvenor fortune is not a pyramid with Hugh at the top. It is a web of trusts, of holdings, of shared interests. When the family meets for Christmas at Eaton Hall, all 20-plus grandchildren, all the in-laws, they are not just a family, they are a board of directors. The city of Westminster. Let us zoom in on the land itself, because the land has a story to tell. Belgravia, with its white stucco houses and embassy flags, was once a swamp called the 5 Fields. Highwaymen robbed coaches there. Pigs rooted in the mud. The Grosvenors drained it, paved it, and turned it into the most expensive neighborhood in the world. Mayfair, to the north, was an annual fairground, hence the name. It was a place of noise, of prostitutes, of bear baiting. The Grosvenors cleared it. They built grid streets. They enforced strict building standards. You could not build a pub on certain streets. You could not open a shop without permission. They curated the neighborhood. Today, the Grosvenor estate employs an army of surveyors, architects, and planners. They decide what color a shopfront can be on Mount Street. They decide whether a hedge in Belgrave Square is too high. They are, in effect, the local council, the planning department, and the landlord, all rolled into one. And the tenants, the hedge funds, the private equity firms, the oligarchs' shell companies, they pay rent that would make a king weep. A small mews house in Mayfair rents for £50,000 a month. A townhouse on Belgrave Square rents for £300,000 a month. Multiply that by 1,000 properties. Then add the commercial rents. Then add the land under the hotels, the offices, the embassies. You start to see the picture. The art of disappearing. But here is the deepest secret of the Grosvenors. They have mastered the art of disappearing. You will not find a Grosvenor on Twitter. You will not see them at film premieres. They do not write memoirs. They do not appear on chat shows. When Hugh Grosvenor married his long-term girlfriend, Olivia Henson, in 2024, the world learned about it from a small announcement in the Chester Chronicle. The wedding itself was private. No OK magazine deal. No helicopter shots. They employ a public relations firm, one of the best in London, not to promote them, but to protect them. Their strategy is simple: be boring. Be so utterly, profoundly uninteresting to the tabloids that the tabloids go away. Compare that to the nouveau riche, the tech founders who live stream their private jets, the crypto kings who buy football clubs. They seek attention. The Grosvenors flee from it, because attention leads to scrutiny. Scrutiny leads to questions about inheritance tax, about the morality of owning half of London, about why one family should have so much when so many have so little. They know those questions exist. They simply refuse to answer them. Silence for the Grosvenors is a shield. The shadow of the Ripper. We cannot tell this story without acknowledging the darkness. Not a darkness of the Grosvenors' making, but one that fell across their land. In the autumn of 1888, a serial killer stalked the streets of Whitechapel, in the East End of London. Jack the Ripper. The victims were poor women, prostitutes. The murders were brutal. The press went wild. At the same time, just 3 miles west, the Grosvenors were putting the finishing touches on Eaton Square. The contrast was obscene. In one London, women froze to death in doorways. In the other, duchesses stepped out of carriages in diamonds. The Grosvenors did not cause poverty, but their wealth was built on the same economic system that created the slums. Landlords in the East End, including the Grosvenors' own relatives, were notorious for squeezing every penny from the poor. The Grosvenors themselves were more benign, but they were not revolutionaries. They accepted the world as it was. Today, the family tries to address this legacy. The Grosvenor estate has one of the most ambitious affordable housing programs of any private landlord in London. They build social housing. They cap rents for small businesses. Hugh Grosvenor has personally championed projects for homeless veterans, drawing on his father's military connections. But the fundamental structure remains. The Grosvenors own the land, the rest of us rent it, and no amount of charitable giving changes that geometry. The global empire. The Grosvenors are not just London, far from it. In the 1950s, the fourth Duke looked across the Atlantic. He saw a booming America. He bought land in Vancouver, the then derelict waterfront of False Creek. Today, that land is some of the most valuable real estate in Canada. Grosvenor Americas is a major developer in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. In the 1990s, the family bet on Asia. They bought land in Shanghai, in Guangzhou, in Hong Kong. They now have a massive portfolio in China. They also have holdings across Europe, in Madrid, in Milan, in Paris. The current structure is extraordinary. The family's holding company, the Grosvenor Group, has assets approaching £20 billion. It operates in 15 countries. It has over 1,500 employees. It issues annual reports, holds shareholder meetings, and follows ESG guidelines. But the ultimate shareholders are not pension funds or institutions. The ultimate shareholders are the descendants of Sir Thomas Grosvenor and Mary Davies, the girl with the swamp. They control the board. They appoint the chairman. They, and only they, can decide to sell. And they never sell. The heir and the spare. Hugh Grosvenor, 7th Duke, married Olivia Henson in 2024. She is not an aristocrat. She comes from a banking family, but she is solidly upper middle class, not noble. She went to Marlborough College, the same school as the Duchess of Cambridge. She worked for a food company. She is described by friends as normal. The wedding was, by Grosvenor standards, a riot of publicity, but only because they allowed a single photographer from a news agency to stand outside the gates of Chester Cathedral. The bride wore a vintage-inspired dress. The groom wore a morning suit. The reception was at Eaton Hall. No celebrity guests, no live stream. Why does this matter? Because the Grosvenors are now entering a new era. Hugh is young. His father died too early, suddenly, of a heart attack. Hugh knows that he could be Duke for 50 years. He knows that his children, the heirs, will inherit a fortune that is likely to be worth £20 billion or more by the time they take over. The question is, what kind of Duke will he be? The early signs are good. He has spoken publicly about the need for responsible capitalism. He has committed the estate to net zero carbon by 2030. He has opened some of the Grosvenor Gardens to the public. He has, whisper it, shown signs of being a modernizer. But the core remains unchanged. When a journalist once asked him if he felt guilty about his wealth, he paused for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't choose to be born into this family, but I have a duty to preserve it. Not for myself, for the people who work for us, the tenants who live on our land, and the future. Selling would be the easy way out. Keeping it together is the hard part." The unspoken question. We come finally to the question that hovers over every sentence of this documentary. Is it right that one family should own so much? Is it right that a 34-year-old man, simply by accident of birth, should control the land that shapes the lives of millions? Is it right that the British aristocracy, stripped of its political power, still clings to its economic dominance? The Grosvenors would say, "We are not owners, we are custodians. We do not strip the land, we improve it. We built the squares, the gardens, the houses. Without us, Mayfair would be a slum. Without us, Belgravia would be a car park." But critics would say, "You extracted the value of the land that society created. You did not build London. The people of London built London. You simply put up a fence and called it yours." There is no easy answer. The Grosvenor estate is not a feudal relic. It is a modern, efficient, well-managed corporation. It pays hundreds of millions in tax every year. It employs thousands. It provides affordable housing, parks, and community spaces. It is, by the standards of global capital, a benign landlord. But it is also a reminder that Britain has never truly had a revolution. The Norman conquest of 1066 established a landowning class that has never been displaced. The Grosvenors came over with William the Conqueror. Their ancestor, Gilbert le Grosvenor, the Great Huntsman, was a Norman knight. 900 years later, his descendants still hold the land. And so the story continues. Tonight, as London sleeps, the Grosvenor estate is still there. The keys to Belgrave Square are still held in the estate office in Mayfair. The leases are still ticking. The rent is still accumulating. The 7th Duke is probably at Eaton Hall, or perhaps at his modest flat in East London. He is not thinking about his billions. He is thinking about the shoot on Saturday, or the planning application for a new development, or his young family. He is, in his own mind, just a man doing a job. But the job is unlike any other. He is the steward of an invisible empire. He is the guardian of the swamp that became a city. He is the face of a family that has mastered the art of being everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The Grosvenors do not seek our approval. They do not need our love. They need only our indifference. Because indifference allows them to continue, to buy a little more land, to plant a few more trees, to wait for the next generation. And somewhere in a vault in a London bank, a piece of parchment from 1677 sits in a climate-controlled box. It is the marriage settlement of Sir Thomas Grosvenor and Mary Davies. It is the most valuable piece of paper in Britain. It is the deed to half of London, and it is never, ever for sale.